Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining Solve ME CFS Initiative and ME Action for the first of 2 online trainings as part of ME CFS Advocacy Week. Thank you all so much for joining us, and just going to touch on a few quick housekeeping items. So for those of us who have joined us for webinars before, you know that our webinars are recorded. We will be recording this webinar, and so the audience is muted so that we can have the best sound quality for our recording, but that doesn't mean you cannot interact with us. We encourage your questions. As you'll see in your screen right now, there's a picture of your webinar toolbox, and you'll see the questions tab. That red arrow points to where you'll type in a question. So if you do have a question as the presentation is going on, you can type it there, and both Erin and myself will be able to see those questions, and we have time at the end of the webinar for questions, so we'll get to the questions at that time. As I mentioned, this webinar is recorded, so if we go too quickly, or you would just want to go back and cover some different areas again, or you have friends who weren't able to join us today, you can get on the either of our organization's YouTube channels, the Solve ME CFS Initiative YouTube channel or the ME Action YouTube channel, and either of those will have a copy of the recording probably by end of day today. So just letting you know if you wanted to find it there to review it again. Again, we'll answer as many questions as we can get to. We will be respectful of your time, but if for some reason we didn't get to your question or something comes up later that you would like to follow up, please email us at MEADV, ADV standing for advocacy, MEADVweek19@gmail.com. That's our email specifically for the ME Advocacy Week events, and we'll get back to you with an answer. We're going to have a quick pause as we begin recording, so we'll be recording on the next slide. So thank you so much for your patience as we begin that process. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the webinar. This webinar is the first of 2 online trainings for ME CFS Advocacy Week, hosted by Solve ME CFS Initiative, ME Action. My name is Emily Taylor. I really appreciate you all joining us today. I'm joined here by ME Action's Erin Rodriguer, and today we are presenting best practices for a successful advocacy meeting. So as I mentioned, my name is Emily Taylor. I'm the Director of Advocacy and Communications for the Solve ME CFS Initiative. I'm here because my mother is a patient, and I'm really thrilled to help share some of my advocacy experience with all of you. And it's also my absolute pleasure to introduce my colleague, partner, comrade in arms, partner in crime for this event. This is Erin Rodriguer.
Hi, everyone. Yes, very excited to be here. I'm with ME Action, and we are just so thrilled to be partnering with SMCI for Advocacy Week coming up in 3 weeks. And I've had a lot of experience in the nonprofit field for quite a few years now, and I've worked on a couple of electoral campaigns. So same with Emily, so excited to use our experience to really make a difference in the lives with people with ME. So really excited to see some of you in a couple of weeks, and also organize with you guys online.
Wonderful. So Erin, would you like to just walk us through today's agenda really quickly?
Yeah, thank you. So as you can see, we have 5 little areas that we'll be touching on. The first is kind of discussing with who you'll be meeting with, so your meeting targets, the general overview of what a congressional office looks like and how it operates. Second, telling your story, how to really turn your experience and your passion into change. The third one is getting prepared, tips and tricks to prepare for your meeting, either in DC or if you're doing a local district meeting. And then second to last is best practices, really how to get the most out of your meeting and make it successful. And the last thing we'll be talking about is a sample meeting, so to really give you an understanding of what it would look like. So a walkthrough of what an outline and how the meeting will go. And then again, as Emily mentioned, we will have questions after.
Sounds great. So if everybody's ready, we'll put in our training caps and dig right in. So I'd like to begin with meeting targets. This is a general overview of sort of what to expect in the offices of your members of Congress. So I used to work in a congressional office. I was an intern in Representative Costa's office back in the early 2000s. It was my first it was my interim job on Capitol Hill after I was a fellow at a think tank, and then I ended up working as effectively a lobbyist for state governments. And that was all, of course, before my mother got sick, and I came back to California because she needed a caretaker, and I was unable to be so far away. But anyway, in that time, I learned some really interesting things about the structures of congressional offices, and I'd like to share that with you now so you can feel more comfortable as you begin your meeting process to advocate for ME. You'll see here on the left is a general congressional office structure. Folks who work in a member of Congress's office generally fall into three categories. We call the first category what we'd say legislative folks. This is, you'll see here on the slide, the legislative director, the legislative assistants, and the legislative correspondents. These people in the center column here are specifically supposed to create laws, input laws, all the things you think about writing and shepherding a bill through the congressional process. That is their job. Their job is to do the legislative work of the congressional office. There's also folks here, you'll see under state district director, field representatives, and caseworkers. These folks fall into what we would call constituent services. This is folks who contact their congressional office because they're having a problem with some level of the federal government in their individual capacity, and they're looking for help navigating the system. And that is something that your congressional office is supposed to do to help you navigate the federal government. They're your representative to the federal government. Then we have this third category, which we generally call political folks. This is the press secretary, office manager, receptionist, mailroom staff, usually the chief of staff and other folks in these capacities. These political functions can go from anything from fundraising to party politics to Twitter and Instagram and all of those other functions that sort of fall under that umbrella. Now, as you see on the left, normally excuse me, there's an expectation that these are very divided, that legislative folks do legislative work, politics folks do politics work, and constituent services folks do constituent services works. On the right, you'll see the reality of congressional offices is much messier. Often these tasks are overlapped or intertwined, that there's interactions between all of these. And so legislative folks aren't just doing legislative work, they're all managing fundraising activities or various other things. So it's all sort of intertwined. So when these folks seem a little frazzled or sometimes pulled in 16 directions is because the work that they're doing really is pulling them in those kind of directions. So one of the things that's really helpful as you take your meetings with congressional offices and their staff through ME CFS Advocacy Week is to kind of keep in mind that that these folks are wearing multiple hats. There's a lot of interactivity between all these people. So even if you get the person that you think, oh, I'm speaking to a field representative, they're not in the right section, they often advise or actually are handling different pieces of the workload that may not be in that quote unquote constituent services area. And the other thing I'll advise you is that a lot of these offices, it's all very individual, up to the member how they organize their own office. If there's a particular staffer that they feel they want to lean on more, even though their job title might not indicate, they might be actually doing different functions because of that individual's capabilities or the member's trust in them. So while this is sort of a general blueprint for what a congressional staff will look like, each individual member will organize their office differently. And so some folks will have job titles that aren't even on this list because that's how the member chose to organize their office. So this is a general guideline, knowing that each member will have a different specific flavor of how they like to structure their office. So the second I would like to follow up with, who are congressional staff? Who are the people that you'll be talking with during MECF Advocacy Week? And you may be very surprised. Most members of staff are actually very young. The average congressional staffer is under 32 years old. There was a very humorous quote that was very popular when I was on Capitol Hill from a news reporter who realized how young all of the staffers were and said, he said the average American voter would would lose it if they found out the entire country was run by 24-year-olds. And there is some truth to that. It takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of drive to be a member of Congress's staff, and so most of these folks are actually very young. So if you do get a person that you speak with who's very young, that doesn't necessarily mean they're very junior. It's just everybody who works in this role tends to be on the younger side. Also, these folks are very connected. Congressional jobs are often and largely based on who you know rather than what you know. So these are people who, for whatever reason, have chosen a path in politics and usually have someone in their network that's helping them on that journey. So networking is always key when you're speaking with congressional staffers, especially when you're making those district connections. You never know who that person knows and how they might be helpful. And lastly, people are new. 18.5% of House staffers vacate that office or that position within a year. So turnover is very frequent. People are constantly shifting jobs. Partially is driven by that ambition. Everyone wants to get as much experience as they can in as many roles as they can. So there's a lot of movement within different roles, especially in the DC side. Less so in the district side. District jobs tend to be a little bit more stable. People stay there for longer. But that's just something to keep in mind, that if someone says, oh my goodness, I've only been at that job 6 months, it sounds like you're getting a rookie, but actually these folks, since they move around so a lot, they're bringing a lot of experience from other areas of the office or even other offices to that role. So just to give you kind of a picture of a Facebook profile, if you will, of the folks that you'll be meeting with during ME CFS Advocacy Week. And with that, I'll turn it over to Erin for telling your story.
Yeah, thank you, Emily, so much. So one huge part of your meeting that you'll be going into is really, you'll give some general facts about ME, but also then it's telling your story. And so part of what you'll do from now until when we have our meetings in April is to really craft a really effective story with the goal to incite action. So again, action taken from your members of Congress to, hopefully do more for the ME community. So something to just note, each of us has a story that can move others to action. And as you begin to learn this skill, you'll be able to tell a compelling story about yourself, your constituency, and the need for urgent and hopeful action. And so the point of telling your story is to really establish your why. I don't know if you guys have seen the TED Talk by, his name is Nyman, and it's really amazing about coming to understanding your why, but really it's the why are you there for Advocacy Day, and so really explaining your reason for being and doing. Also, it's to build trust and human connection and to establish credibility. And then again, most importantly, to inspire action. So now that we're on this slide, we can see that stories draw on our emotions to show our values in action, help us feel what matters rather than just thinking about telling others what matters, because stories allow us to express our values, and not as just abstract principles, but as lived experience. They do really have the power to move others. So the stories connect. A story helps us connect an urgent challenge that we're called upon to face now, and a story focuses on the challenge that requires action and the hope for action and the choice we're calling on others to make. In your story, you're calling on others to join you in taking action. So as you start thinking about your story, there's kind of like a general overview or 3 parts that you want to kind of figure out and develop. And so the first one is the challenge. And this is where you can kind of figure out what is your journey with ME CFS as a personal journey, as a caregiver or an advocate. And is there a particular moment that stands out to you that really is that you want to highlight? And then the second part of the story is the advocate decision. Why did you decide to become an advocate for ME CFS? So what brought you to Advocacy Day or Advocacy Week, and what brought you to taking action? And then the third one is asking, is that action and ask. So it's that thing where you've drawn people in, and now you're giving them something to do. You're telling them what the next thing that you want them to do. So what action are you looking for the other person to take on? One really important thing to know as you begin to craft your story is that your story will only be about 2 to 3 minutes. So I know there's a lot that you probably want to say and cover. Everyone's story has a lot of information to share. But the goal is to really craft something that's only about 2 to 3 minutes. And so I think what's important about that is to just keep figuring out. And so I know we've jumped ahead from getting prepared, but I want to give you a quick example of how a quick 2 to 3 minute story, so you can see the 3 different parts. And so this is my own kind of story. I'll say it's very high level. I know your guys' story will have a lot more emotion and depth to it, but this is just an example. So I'll just say, as I started out very young in my life, I was very interested in politics growing up. I loved to know what was going on in the world and watching the news. And then in college, though, I got very disheartened. I got disengaged and I got complacent. And I didn't really think that my involvement really mattered. But then a few years later, I really read a book that challenged me on all of those thoughts and said that if I wanted to make a difference, that I had to get off the couch and I had to get involved. So then that kind of decision, and after reading that book, made me start volunteering for political campaigns, which led then to me working on my first presidential campaign. And now I have a whole life dedicated to politics and advocacy work. And so I'm asking you now as listeners to join me in being a voice and getting involved in our political atmosphere so we can make change. So for that example, just to break it down so you can see the challenge, the advocate decision, and then the action is that, I talk about how I was once interested in politics and then I got very disheartened. The advocate decision and choice was I read a book that challenged me, that told me to get involved, and then I did get involved. I went and volunteered, I worked on campaigns, and then the ask and the action was I was asking you as listeners to get involved and participate with us. So that's kind of the 3 kind of major blocks that you want to start figuring out as you build your story. And so I would just really recommend, like I said, these next 3 weeks to kind of play with this configuration and figure out what works best for you, what you want to highlight in your story. And we do have some quick do's and don'ts. Do be honest. So important to really share your story. One thing is to not be as negative, kind of just really relay the facts as they are. And again, like we said, make it personal, share your emotion, share your truth, and then don't get distracted. And then as you can say, once we figure out and we explain to you guys what our asks will be on Advocacy Day, is to definitely link to your asks. And then also when you're speaking with the members in the offices, to not make assumptions or accusations about anything. So that's the kind of main breakdown of that. So thank you so much. If you guys have questions about stories, we'll happily answer them. Send us emails. We can help you with that. But we're happy to go on to getting prepared. All righty. All right. Tips and tricks for your meeting. Who's all excited for Advocacy Week and Day? I hope everyone is, because I know Emily and I are very, very excited. So the first thing, as I said, as we were just talking a couple slides ago, was to really hone in your story and practice it. And like I said, it will be about 2 to 3 minutes, which goes by very, very quickly. As we go into it, your general congressional meeting will be about 15 to 30 minutes or 15 to 20 minutes. So telling your story does have to be quick. And you might be doing it with other people. So you also, multiple people will be giving your story. So you do want to make it short and you want to practice it so you feel comfortable in doing it. I will say that it's totally normal that you get emotional or nervous telling your story. The more emotion and the truth and the vulnerability you're sharing, the better. So, practice it so that you feel a little bit more comfortable doing it. Second, before your meeting, gather with your group to discuss who will be doing what during the meeting. So for people who are in DC, you'll be getting your agenda for when your meetings will be on the 3rd. And so you might be able to meet on Tuesday night before to figure out who will be going what by state. Sometimes this happens in the hallway because you don't know who's who. And so if you're in the hallway of the Senate building or the Congressional representative buildings, just meet in the hallway and quickly gather and say, okay, who is going to be telling the story, or who's going to be making the intros, who will be sharing their story, how many of you will be sharing your story, who will be making the asks, and then another one is who will be taking notes and gathering business cards. So that's those kind of things to figure out before you go into your meeting. If you're doing local meetings in your district offices, if you're doing it with more than one person, again, kind of figure this stuff out, and so everyone knows who to go through and the meetings can run as smoothly as possible and hopefully on time. And then the other thing is, before you go, review the handouts that you'll be giving to your staff. So if you're coming to Advocacy Day, you'll be getting a folder with a lot of information, both for yourself and then also folders to be handing to the people that you meet with in the office. Just review those to make sure you understand what's in there. We'll, of course, in our trainings in DC, go over those information for you to have, so that all that information will be there for you to review. And then if you're doing district offices, make sure you print them out. And so maybe send them to a Kinko's if you want high quality, or at your house, but make sure you just know where those are and that you have an understanding of what is written on them. And then again, review the asks to make sure you know what you're specifically asking for. We are still working on creating the asks. There's a lot going on in DC at the moment, so we're honing in on those things. We'll definitely have them available for you in the coming weeks. But just know you feel comfortable speaking about them when you're talking with the person you're meeting with. So yeah, so that's kind of our general overview of how to get prepared for your meeting. Emily, do you want to go ahead?
Absolutely. Sorry, there was answering a couple questions that popped up. So thank you all for that, and thank you, Erin. That was a great description of your story and getting prepared for your meeting. I think a lot of folks are touching on some items. I'm just seeing the questions that are coming up that are related specifically to DC. So our goal with this presentation is to talk about some of the general best practices for meetings in a broad sense, because some people are holding local meetings, some people are doing phone-based calls and meetings, some people are doing online actions. So this is a broader summary of kind of advocacy on that whole level for folks who are inclusive for folks who are local and in DC. And then our next webinar will go a lot more into the details and the logistics of our DC attendance as well. So I'm just trying to give you a sense of where we're heading. So now I'm going to touch on meeting best practices, how to get the most out of your meeting with your member of Congress or your congressional office. And so we'll start with, just as Erin already described, it's okay to be nervous, especially if it's your first meeting. These folks who you're meeting with, these staffers and even the member themselves, they are very accustomed to kind of how intimidating they can be, and they're very welcoming, they're very understanding. They do this day in and day out, and they understand, and they actually receive a lot of sensitivity training about how overwhelming this can be if it's not your regular day-to-day. So these folks are, so don't worry if you're nervous. It's okay to be nervous. They're very warm and accepting, so don't feel like you have to put on airs or impress these people. You're just there to be as Erin said, to tell your truth, to be your genuine self, and to communicate with these people human to human. So the second kind of tips about being best practices for your meeting is read the materials if you can. We'll be providing on the website copies of the congressional packets that will be going out in DC as well. So it's a great opportunity just to read them, to get familiar with the talking points. It just kind of makes you feel more comfortable in the meeting. And the lastly is relax. You don't have to be the expert. In fact, that's exactly why Erin and I are here. We're here to help you and support you. And it's our job to do that heavy lifting, and it's your job to tell your truth. So don't feel like if there's some question that comes up with some acronym that you don't understand, referencing some government program that you've never heard of, don't worry about that. That is not your role. So if the questions do come up, again, just write them down and pass them along to Erin and I. It's our jobs to be that expert, and your job is to just be comfortable and to share your story and to make that personal impact. So just quick touches on best practices during your meeting. This is when you're meeting face-to-face or having a phone conversation with a member of Congress or their staff. Be positive. I think there's a tendency, and I think these offices often hear a lot of long, difficult sagas, because if you're meeting with these people, you're obviously things are not okay. If everything was okay, you wouldn't be in their office. So they know that there's something wrong, and they understand that. And so that's sort of a given, as the nature of the meeting is that you're trying to correct something that's wrong. So try to be positive when you're telling that that issue, don't sugarcoat it. You don't want to make it sound like it's worse or better than it is. You want to be as again, as Erin said, tell your truth, be honest and authentic. But it's not a event session. It's there to really have this as Sergeant Friday would say, just the facts. And also listen. So a lot of these folks, they'll resonate with your story and they will hear what you have to say, and it'll touch something in their own lives. And so if they choose to share their story back with you, or some other incident that maybe your conversation triggered in their thoughts, listen to that. Again, that personal connection is really super strong, and that's one of the things that really drives a lot of this forward. Take notes. That's obviously an important one. And then if you're not able to take notes, again, you can have someone come with you. That's part of that preparation. You know, if some person says, "I'm sorry, my vision's really bad, note taking isn't for me," find someone in your group who that they're comfortable with that role, and make sure that if they give you advice or feedback, that you're writing that down. And of course, ask questions. Again, you are not expected to be an expert in this, and if the policy staffer, we often get in our own worlds. We're so in the heart and beating heart of politics that we'll just sputter off with acronyms and we don't even remember what they stand for. And if they say, you know, you can always say, "Hey, slow down. What does that mean? I'm not familiar with that program. Can you explain that?" So again, these folks ultimately serve you, and if they say something that you don't understand or they're speaking too quickly, you're totally put up your hand if you have to and say, "I'm sorry, could you repeat that, or can you explain what that means?" And then these are a couple insider tips and tricks. This is stuff that I've kind of learned the hard way. So learn from my mistakes. The first is correct with kindness. I've had those circumstances where and it makes me angry even now, where, "Oh, are you sure that your mom didn't just, her thyroid wasn't low, or, was she really tired? I'm tired too." And you have to take that little bit of breath, and I try to correct with kindness. So things like, if they say, "Oh, I'm tired too," I'm like, "I understand that you're tired, and I know your job is very exhausting, but I'm not talking about tired. I'm talking about exhausted on a cellular level because these people are very sick, or my mother is very sick." Try to make it personal. That's one thing I'm jumping ahead to bullet point 4, but definitely make it personal. If you can connect that to a very human moment as opposed to speaking in the broad royal we sense, that's really a helpful item, as opposed to saying people with ME/CFS are very sick, my mother is very sick, my friend is very sick, my daughter is very sick. That's a really great way to just really bring that point home. Make eye contact. This is one that is sometimes challenging, because I did an exercise at one training I went to at the Genetics Alliance, where they had us partnered up with a random stranger from the conference, sit down and look them in the eyes for 5 straight minutes. And it's amazing. It's awkward at first, but you really connect with people, even strangers, that you just make that eye contact with. And so I think it's a little uncomfortable at first, but you get used to it. And it's amazing how just really looking someone in the eyes can just, it makes that connection all the more real. So definitely, I know you might be nervous, and I know that there's trying to jumble your thoughts, but making eye contact with the person you're meeting with is a very powerful tool. This is bullet point number 3, bullet point the third. I often use Jeopardy rules, and I say this with a bit of a smile, because for those of you who are familiar with Jeopardy, you always answer in the form of a question. And so this one thing that I like to do to try and engage the other person if they're not really pulled into the conversation, for example, if you want to get to a point about how many people in the United States are estimated to have ME/CFS, I sometimes put it in the form of a question. It's like, how many people do you think have ME/CFS? Or are you familiar with how many people have MS? Did you know that twice as many people have ME/CFS have MS? And so things like that, trying to form it in the phrase of a question to pull them in, get them a little bit more interested. That's a great insider tip. Make it personal. I already touched on that. And again, just to really emphasize, you don't have to have all the answers. If there's an area that they ask about, or something that you don't understand, even if it's something that we already trained you about and you're like, "Oh goodness, I should know this," don't worry. Again, it's not your job to be an expert, to have all that information. Most of that information is in your packet. You can always just refer back to your packet and say, "Oh, you know what, we did talk about that. It's on this sheet here." open your packet and pull it out, and that's fine. And again, use your cheat sheets or your packets as reference materials if you lose where you're at. Again, I understand that it's a little nerve-wracking talking to the stranger for the first time, especially sharing your story can be very overwhelming. Don't stress out about it. It's totally fine. Have your information there and ready, and if you don't have the answer or you don't know where it's at, write it down, and Erin and I will follow up. So that's kind of just to make it as easy as possible, the best practices for when you're having that meeting for the first time or the 100th time. So from here, Erin and I are going to walk you through a sample meeting. But before we do that, I just wanted to touch on some of the questions that are starting to come in. Is that okay, Erin, if I just, I see a couple of these are repeats, and it seems like a couple people have the same question.
Yeah, perfectly fine.
Great. So just touching on one of the questions that seems to be coming in somewhat frequently about the asks. As Erin mentioned, the asks will be made available. We're kind of finalizing them with our champions now. So you can expect more information about that on the next webinar that'll dig a little deeper into Washington, D.C. And also we'll really get into them at the Washington, D.C. in-person training. And then the second question that's come up a couple times is about sharing the contact information of people in your group. I just want to say that we are very dedicated and very, very aware of privacy, and privacy policies are something that are both of our organizations hold to very highly. So we will not share anybody's contact information without their permission. So you will not be getting the contact information of the people in your group per se, because we are protecting your privacy. But we do have the Facebook group that's set up so that people can connect. And also at the training in Washington, D.C., we'll have everybody set up by states, and you'll have opportunities both at the networking reception and at the training itself to connect with people who are very likely to be in your group. And at that time, you will have received your schedules, so you'll have an outline of what your meeting for the days will look like and who will be in your group, and everybody will have name tags so you can track each other down. Great. Okay. Well, thank you so much for letting me take that quick pause, Erin. Do you want to jump into the sample meeting?
Yeah, wonderful. We can head, yeah. So the sample meeting, like we said, the meetings will probably be pretty short. 25 minutes to 30 minutes is a long meeting. Sometimes they're 15 minutes. So just be mindful of that they do go by really, really quickly. So that's why it's really important to kind of practice and get prepared for some of these things so that you make sure you hit all the points that need to be hit. So the first one is the welcome. You'll come in, you might have to wait either in the hallway if you're in DC, or wait in a lobby. So just know that might be possible. But again, make sure you're shaking hands with whoever you're meeting. As Emily mentioned, very importantly, make that eye contact. One thing that they love to do in these meetings is to exchange business cards. So everyone, they'll bring one in and pass them all around to everyone in the meeting. And so if you have one yourself or as a volunteer and advocate, also please feel free to hand those out to them so they know who they're meeting with. But we really do say accept all of the staff members' business cards that you can. And if there's multiple people you're meeting with, they'll give you multiple cards. So you'll have quite a few business cards as you leave. And then staff will usually let you begin first. And so don't feel rushed to start talking immediately, but they'll kind of look to you to kind of start leading and guiding where this meeting will go. And so do take your time to get settled and comfortable. You'll probably, depending on how many people are in the room, you'll be sitting around a table. So make sure, place your notes where you want to see them and everything, and get your paper and pen ready for the meeting. So that's really what I have there. And then also, so kind of how a structured timeline out goes is that you'll come in, you'll shake your hands, you'll say thank you so much for meeting and talking. They'll probably ask, how long are you here for? And you'll just make that general small talk that we're all familiar with. And so that should take about 2 minutes. And then the second thing that you'll focus on is introducing yourself, and everyone in your meeting in the group will be introducing themselves, and share your connection to the constituents. So, I live in this this area. I live in this district. And then, as you go around, others introduce themselves and their connections. So that should take around about 6 minutes total for everyone making introductions. And we can go to the next slide. Yeah. And so then once you kind of get all the introductions done, you'll really begin starting to get into the meat of the meeting. And so you'll just quick things to remember is, again, as we referred up earlier in the presentation, is to remember your storytelling tips. Refer to your local area and district. Mention what city you live in. Maybe mention different, hospitals or doctors you visited, or the lack of doctors and hospitals that aren't available to you. Another thing is to feel free and ask questions of them to make sure they understand what you're saying, and confirming with them that they know what you're trying to get across. So again, after you make your small talk and introductions, someone will lead questions about 5 minutes, kind of going into gauging how familiar that staff member you're meeting with is with ME/CFS. So how familiar are you with it, with the disease? Have you met any constituents before? Some offices are very familiar with us. They know we come every year. Some offices have had virtual phone calls with other constituents, so they might be well versed, or as Emily said, they're brand new and this is their first time doing anything with us. So those are all possibilities. Again, do you know anyone with a chronic illness? It kind of helps bring them into understanding what a chronic illness is. And what about ME/CFS do you think connects with the representative? So example, if you know that your representative has signed a letter, like we did a letter in December, if they signed that, that's a great little note to do. Or if they haven't signed it, that's also a great little note to share. And so that should be about 5 minutes. And then, the heart of the story time, this is the time to tell your story. And that's about 10 minutes, depending on how many people will be sharing their story in your meeting. So you want to make an emotional connection, as we talked about, making it personal. And like I said, link to a small talk or connection that you have with them, and a link to the asks, so that people feel drawn in. Like, you've gotten them emotional, they're ready, they're connected to your story, and then you want them to take action, and that feeds right into the asks, and that will be about 5 minutes. And as Emily referenced, we're still working on them, but you will get a lovely packet with all of this information and contact information, so you'll be able to hand them handouts about the asks, and you'll be able to speak with them and see if they engage on how the asks go. Yeah. Wonderful.
Well, that covers a pretty broad overview of feeling a bit more comfortable and kind of the basics of what to expect during a congressional meeting, along with a sample outline to kind of give you a sense of how to get started. So now is a great time to touch on questions. There's definitely a lot pouring in. So I'm going to try to generalize them, because some folks have asked some very specific questions, but I'm going to try to address all of these broader issues. The first one I think is very easy. Will these slides be made available after the presentation? Absolutely. We will post them on the website, which once again is meadvocacyweek.com. That's meadvocacyweek.com. And all of the information, including the slides from this presentation and the recording from this presentation, will be on that website. I touched on this a little bit before. Will you get the contact information of the people in your group? Again, we are very strict and adhere to privacy policies, so we will not share people's personal contact information, but you will have the names of the people who are in your group. So you'll be able to find them either during, again, the networking reception and during the training. And of course, you'll try to be at every meeting you have just a couple minutes, maybe 5 to 10 minutes early, so that you can meet with your group outside of the meeting space. Another question that came in is, will there be name badges to make it easier to find others in your group? Absolutely. We will have name tags on site in Washington, D.C. for everyone who's joining us there. If you're coordinating your own local meeting with advocates in your area, I'd recommend maybe bringing some name tags, like just the hello, my name is types that you can use for the meeting, or again, just meeting up a couple minutes before the meeting so that you meet your fellow advocates and you can coordinate that initial who's doing what part of the meeting preparation. There was a question about printouts. So for those of you who are joining us in Washington, D.C., we will have your congressional packets and your personal participant packets all ready to go. All those materials will be provided for you. If you're organizing a local meeting, either whether by phone or doing your own local district meeting outside of the Capitol for ME/CFS Advocacy Week, again, those materials will be up on the website. So just keep an eye out. We'll definitely send out an announcement when they're all up there so that you can either print them out and then take them to your local district or email them to the staffer that you're meeting with by phone. A couple other questions that came in. An issue we ran in last year were buying objections. So I think if you get pushback in terms of what the ask is, again, you're not expected to be an expert. And so if they give you a common response to pushback that we get is, well, I don't sponsor one disease over another. All diseases are equal to me. That's something we hear pretty common. Again, just kind of write that down. And I know that's a little awkward when you get that in the moment. You're just like, well, but don't let it stress you out. If you just kind of continue with your presentation, a common response to that is, yes, but our disease has different needs and has really been not addressed in a way that's appropriate, and the people are still suffering for decades. And so we do need to change how we're approaching this, because if we don't, we're just going to continue down the same path, which is unacceptable. So that's one example of how to push back. But again, just kind of note that pushback and then feed that information through your reporting forms to Aaron and myself, and then we'll approach them with the kind of more advanced and drilling down into the specifics to address that office and their issues specifically. What organization can be, sorry, this is another question. What organization can be aware of or utilize to find out our lobbying partners with preparation time? So by lobbying partners, I assume you mean your group. So groups are set up primarily by state, but because some folks are representing other states by proxy, you'll kind of group together and then peel off to do a different meeting and then come back together. So I'm just going to pick a random state. Let's say you happen to be from Utah, and you are meeting with your representative from the state of Utah and your 2 Utah senators, but you're also representing your sister, and your sister lives in Colorado. So what might happen throughout the day is your Utah meetings will be with other folks from Utah, and you'll meet them and you'll do 2 or 3 meetings together with that group, and then you'll peel off and you'll meet other folks from the Colorado group, and you'll be joining them for the Colorado meetings. So your groups will kind of split and come back together, and there'll be folks, especially folks who are traveling together, like a mother-daughter or husband-wife. You'll stick together, and if you've requested in your registration form that you want to be partnered with an individual person, especially that question, I am traveling with, and then you put in the name of the person, or please group me with, and then you put in the name of the person, we will do our absolute best to keep you guys together. That's why we have those questions on there. So if you're traveling with a husband or a wife or a daughter, or whoever you're traveling with, you'll likely, very unlikely that you'll be split up. You'll probably be a group unto yourselves, but then that group might migrate depending on which states you're representing. So I hope that answers that question. Oh goodness, the questions are really flying in. Why don't I pass this question to Erin? Is that okay? This question is, will people not representing ME be in the room during your meeting? Oh, Erin, did we lose you?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry. And so I guess my apologies. Would people not representing ME be in the room? What I'm hearing from that is that will other people possibly be meeting with you or joining your group? And I will say that generally that is not the case. Your meeting will be designated to the people that have been scheduled for that time who are part of ME/CFS Advocacy Week. So there won't be people who aren't part of our larger group in that meeting with you. But of course, the staff members and staff there they might be in the meeting with you. So as Emily laid out, there could be quite a few different staff members who join you, and so those people in there, but everyone in the meeting who at that certain time will be part of our group. If I'm understanding the question correctly. If I'm not, please clarify. I'm happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Erin. And I think that's exactly right. We'll definitely be our meetings unto ourselves. We won't have anybody else there. Maybe in the future we'll partner with some broader groups. Who knows in the coming years? But for now, this is just an ME specific event. Another question that's come up from a couple people is about the future trainings. There's some concern that that folks who are, for whatever reason, unable to attend the webinar training live or the April 2nd in-person training, don't worry. So first of all, like, as we mentioned at the beginning, all of these webinars are recorded and available on YouTube, so you can watch them anytime if you need to go back, or if you were unable to join us live, you can watch the webinar almost as good as live on YouTube. And that'll be, again, available on the website, www.meadvocacyweek.com. The in-person training on April 2nd in Washington, D.C. will also be live broadcast and recorded, but I don't believe we'll be able to get the recording up that day. So there will be a live webinar broadcast. So for those who are too sick to join us in person, but still joining us on Capitol Hill on the 3rd, you can watch that whole presentation live streamed. Or in person, which of course is always, you get to see our smiling faces. And so that I think should be a good balance for those who can't join us. And again, the second webinar that we'll be hosting on March 27th will go a little bit more into the logistical details of Washington, D.C., and also more specifically into our asks for this advocacy week. So I hope that answered, that was about 4 or 5 questions all answered in one go. So I hope that's helpful. The last, I got a couple other questions here. Where can I find the letter from December to read? That will be in the packet, so we'll make sure to get that on the website as soon as possible. I'll make sure to flag that for you, that it'll be on the website. We're going to hopefully upload those in the next week or so. And wow, so many questions. Thank you, everybody, for all your comments. And actually, Erin, this one's specifically for you, so I'll pass this one over to you as well. Thanks, Erin. The conversation about groups stood out since I believe there are only 3 from our state traveling to DC, but we have 7 congressional offices. I just figured I would be alone during the staff meeting, but we'll reply anyway. So, Erin, do you want to talk about the different, how we do the groups and making sure no one's alone?
Yeah, wonderful. So yes, if depending on some states, there could be a lot of people coming, so I will say, usually the Senate meetings, obviously, because everyone has the same senators. Usually your senator meetings are the larger groups, and so I've attended it where it's like 20 people in one room with a senator, and then I've also attended meetings where I was meeting with a representative in Texas, and the individual who was actually the constituent, this was her first time, and so she was attending, and then there was another person who was a support there, who was, I think on the questionnaire we ask if you are if you want to help out and you're an experienced advocate, if you want to help out other people, I think we ask that on the registration form. And so if you've marked that, you might also be in helping and assisting other people. So if there are the meetings where you're the only person representing your district, we will have other people who will be there to help support you based upon what their schedules look like. So from my understanding, no one will be going into a meeting by themselves. It will probably, I think the lowest amount would be 2, but for sure we could probably get 3. There's also additional staff. There's myself, Emily, SMCI is sending some more people, ME Action sending more people, and so those people also will be there, need be, to help bring us. You're never alone in a meeting. But again, like I said, it might be 3, but it could be as many as, I think California has quite a few people going. So, for those senator meetings, it could be a good chunk of people in those rooms. So, but yeah, so again, you should never feel alone. That is a good thing to know when you're going into these, especially if it's your first time, is that you'll always have support of others there to make sure the meeting goes as well as possible.
Thank you so much, Erin. Yes, and the one thing I'll just follow up with quickly is on that registration form, you may have noticed the two questions. As Erin just mentioned, there's the are you an experienced advocate and willing to help others? And so those folks will be distributed to the new groups who are less experienced, so that they're, as best as we can, always be an experienced advocate in every group for every meeting. And also, I just wanted to point out, there's also the question, it's a two-part question. Do you need a healthy-bodied or able-bodied person to assist you in moving around? And also, are you an able-bodied person and able to assist others? That one is something that we usually get blank. So if you can, I really encourage you to fill out that particular question, because that enables us to not just partner the experienced advocates with the inexperienced advocates, but also partner folks who are able to maybe help push a wheelchair who are healthy for the folks who need a little bit of extra assistance with the physical movement around the day. So that's definitely a question I would highlight for folks who haven't already filled out the registration form, to make sure you answer that one fully. So that brings us almost to the top of the hour, and I thank you so much for all of your kind words in the question box. We really appreciate you. Again, Lobby Day is about bringing your voices directly to the people in power, and so we're here to help. We're here to be your voice, your extra hands, and we're just so thrilled. I may be talking out of school a little bit, but I'm happy to share that we have over 200 people registered to go to DC for ME/CFS Advocacy Day, which is unprecedented. We're so thrilled. Okay, so a couple more questions coming in. Let's see here. So I'm just going to read this out. Can we prioritize meeting with as many representatives from a single state? There are a few advocates coming, and folks who are comfortable talking to staff on their own. Oh, that's a great question. So Erin, do you want to take that one really quick?
Yeah, can I just have it clarified? Can you read it one more time for me? Yeah.
If we don't mind being alone, can we prioritize meeting with other representatives from a state if there's a few representatives and one person feels comfortable taking meetings by themselves?
Yeah, so we are working with a company to help us schedule our meetings. So you'll, if you are comfortable being by yourself, I would say hopefully you flagged on your registration that you are, feel like you're an advanced advocate or experienced advocate. And if you're comfortable being by yourself and representing, let us know. Email us at, I think our email address was on the very first page of the, we're going back to get it. I think it's ME and then it's advweek@gmail.com. And so you can email us that information. I think one more slide back. There it is. Yeah, advweek19@gmail.com. Email us and let us know if you are interested in representing by yourself. But again, we are working with a company to do the scheduling. And so based upon what is available and what that is, that they kind of manage that side of the side of it, but we're happy to pass that information on to them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Erin. And then one other question that came in about wheelchair accessibility. So for folks who utilize wheelchairs, we are actually including a specific map in your packets that's all of the handicap accessible pathways and entrances around Capitol Hill. And so we definitely encourage you, and even if you don't normally use a wheelchair, but this is a day that's a lot on your feet. So even healthy folks, I think, could use a little help, and wheelchairs are most welcome and accessible. We do ask you to let us know if you're using a wheelchair so that we can flag the offices that you're meeting with. Last year we did run into a problem where one office scheduled a non-handicap accessible space. So we want to make sure that we tell the offices that they need to be handicap accessible so that you can access your meeting. And secondly, this is new this year, we have actually found a couple wheelchairs that we will have available on a rotating basis for our group. So stand by for more information on how exactly those will access. We have some healthy volunteers who are going to funnel them to our base camp room, which is at Cannon 121 this year. And those wheelchairs will be available throughout the day as needed. And so I know wheelchair rentals can be very expensive, but we'll have a couple available for the day of for people who need them. Oh my goodness, thank you all again for so many questions are coming in. Another question came in, do you need a shoulder tote for packets, etc.? We actually, yes, and we will be providing you with a little tote bag that will be able to help carry your packets around. I recommend traveling light because you do need to go in and out of security, and again, it's a long day. Carrying stuff is always difficult on your shoulders and back. So I would say carry just what you need, but we will be providing you with a tote bag that can help you carry those items. And then another question that just came up, are the buses running back to the hotel? And the answer to that is unfortunately no. The buses are running to the hotel, and then folks will be making their own way back depending on what time they leave. Again, everyone's meeting schedule is individualized to their particular legislators. So some folks may have all of their meetings in just a couple hours, and then they're just done and want to go back to the hotel. And some folks may have meetings spread out throughout the whole day. So it really, and unfortunately, we are just subject to the whims of our members of Congress and their scheduling. So we do our best to make requests to make our meetings accessible and minimize the walking primarily as much as we can. But sometimes those things are just out of our hands. So we did keep the schedule throughout the day very flexible for folks who may need to just leave early because they happen to be done earlier. And then there's another question about walking to the shortest path. Yes, definitely there. And is there an app to navigate in real time? I'm not familiar with an app to navigate Capitol Hill, but now that you mention it, I'm sure somebody's done it, so I'll do some research to see if there's one available. When it comes to using your mobile devices, we will have a mobile tool that will be accessible through your email address and login that'll allow you to mobilely access your personalized meeting schedule. And this will be updated in real time, which definitely can be a challenge because, again, we are subject to the whims of Congress, and if the Congress member is running late or they've decided to reschedule the meetings the day of, which often happens, those updates will be going straight to your phone and to your email address. So if there is any changes that hit us blindside on the day of from the Congress member's office, you'll have your app, or not an app, but your mobile tool available real time with your custom login so that you can see your individualized meeting schedules. Okay, I just want to be respectful of time, so I'm only going to take one or two more questions. Gosh, there's so many. I'll make sure to send follow-up answers. And of course, you can always email us again at meadvweek19@gmail.com if you have more questions. The last two I'm going to take is, our hallway yoga mat breaks okay? Absolutely. One thing I always like to remind folks is, even though it may feel like you're walking into some sort of foreign land in the buildings of Congress, they are in fact public buildings, and they are in fact your buildings. These members and their offices and their staff exist to serve you. So if you need to take a yoga mat in the hallway and lay down, that is your hallway to lay down onto. That being said, we do have the base camp room, again, available all day in Cannon 121, and that room will be equipped with a couple cots and blankets and pillows for people to lie down. It'll have some coffee and refreshments for people to refuel. And so definitely, if you need to lay down in the hallways between offices, do so. But if you have a bit of a longer break, you'll probably be more comfortable back at base camp. And then last question. Oh, that's so sweet. We couldn't do this without you. Thank you, guys. Thank you. That makes me smile. Wonderful. Well, any questions we didn't get to, I will definitely share with Erin, and we'll send responses back through the Gmail account. Erin, do you have any final closing thoughts you'd like to share?
Well, just again, thank you all for taking the time today to join us. And for those of us who we will see in DC, we'll see you so soon. And I look forward to meeting a lot of you and putting faces to names. And those of us who are taking action from home or from wherever, we are so appreciative. As Emily mentioned, it's really an opportunity to bring our power to DC and, really ask our representatives and senators to do more on our behalf. So I'm really excited about the coming week and the action that we can take. So thank you again for all of your time.
Absolutely. Well, that brings us to the top of the hour. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us. Again, this webinar will be recorded and available on YouTube. Please email us at meadvweek19@gmail.com if you have any questions. And of course, all of the information, registration forms, the schedules, calendars, videos, everything is available on that centralized website, www.meadvocacyweek.com. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for sharing your voices as part of our effort to fight for ME. Thank you all. Have a wonderful afternoon.